Welcome, welcome, how are we all? I always give you a little bit of a song to start. Hi, everybody, how are you doing? I'm just waiting for you all to join me. How is everyone? Hey, Cynthia, how you doing? Giving you a wave. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Welcome. We had a week's rest last week and we're back with the fire, the fire, the fire, and I'm so excited. So my name is Simone Bresi-Ando. I am the founder, the creator of Bresi-Ando Tools for Living. We have a few unique and world first products, one of them being the Adinkra ancestral guidance cards, and also the Anchor knot cushions, which are my loves. I'm incredibly happy to be here. Welcome to Ancestrally Speaking on this Sunday, June the 14th. The sun's shining, I'm feeling energized, and I'm supremely happy because I have someone I've been a fan of for a long time, Jamila Lemieux, joining. And yeah, I'm just really excited that she is going to be joining us. So I'm just waiting for her to come through and then I will add her into the live. You know, we do what we do. Sorry, guys, multitasking and I couldn't talk and think. So how you guys been feeling? Tell me in the comments what you've been doing. Hey, Jamila, she's here. You just got a request to be in the live and then I will let you in. Have you guys been feeling? Tell us in the comments. This is going to be a ancestrally nutritious conversation, and we're going to allow Jamila to come through and join us. Whoop, whoop. I can't wait. This is exciting, and I hope everyone is cool. Oh, yay!
Hi, hi, good
Hi,
morning.
good morning. How you doing? How's it going?
Uh, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all, actually. I'm happy the sun. I mean, the sun's been a bit consistent recently, but it's just
Hmm.
so good. It's like, yes, come, come. We need it. We need it. So it's
Good.
been good. It's good to see you. And thank you. I know you're
You
on the
too.
West Coast, so this is like early, early. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
of course, of course. And I want to let everybody into, it's not really a secret, but you were one of the first people to buy my decks. One of the
What?
very, very, yes, because I launched them that day at Essence when we saw each other.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
literally they hadn't been out in the public. So that was where they were launched. So they were launched in 2017, 2018 Essence
2018.
Festival. Yeah, 2018
Oh,
Essence Festival. And you bought them and you connected with them, which I'm so glad you did.
yes.
And I wanted to invite you on this because I've been a fan of yours for a long time. You've been
Thank
doing
you.
the work, right? And
Thank
you've been
you.
asking us the hard questions of ourselves, sometimes of yourself too, but also of us as a people. Black people, African descent people, you've been asking those questions. And so we're really at an interesting time, right? Where it's
Definitely.
either change or die. Those are the two kind of questions we're being posed with. But I also want to kind of talk about the joys we found, but also what's our ancestral journey to where we are? What's your spirituality like? I really want to talk from that angle because I think there are those things that we know about, right? The political side, the survival side. But how
Hmm.
are we nourishing ourselves ancestrally, spiritually, so we can continue this fight? And I know that equality and fighting for justice is something that runs through your family as well. So you're not new to this game. So I'm really, 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 really excited to have you here. So let me
Thank
stop
you.
talking because I'm like, oh, and over to you. So just tell the people who you are, what you've been doing. We want to know. We want to know.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Simone. You are a light.
Oh,
From when we
thank
met at
you.
Essence, your
Yeah.
energy, everything about you,
Oh,
I was just attracted to, and you're so sweet. And I
oh,
was
thank
really
you.
excited. I remember you gifted me a candle,
Yes, exactly.
which
Yes,
was so
yes, yes,
nice.
yes.
And when I saw
Yeah.
the cards, I was like, okay, I have to have
Yeah,
these. So
I
I
didn't
didn't.
even realize you bought them. I think I don't know what I was doing, but it was so messy, like
There's a lot
manic.
going
And then
on.
I said,
Yes.
yeah. So then when you posted it, I was like, oh, she bought them, and I was just like, oh, that's good. So it's good. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, but I'm a writer
Yes.
and cultural critic.
Hmm.
I've been writing publicly for the internet and for print and yeah, for print and digital publications since I started a blog when I was in college in like
Right.
2005, 2006, and it just kind of
Wow.
became a career from there. And so I've been writing ever since then. I live in Los Angeles after being in LA, after being in Brooklyn for 12
Ooh,
years.
that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love Brooklyn. I'm sending
Yeah.
you all my love, and
Back to
it's
you.
very hard being away from you all right
Yeah.
now. But
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
felt part of the reason I'm out here is that I felt I needed a spiritual reset.
Yes, I understand
Um,
that. Hmm.
New York is a difficult place to live. Not that it's an easy place
Ooh,
either,
yes, yeah.
but I just felt that, I needed to get in touch with my body. I need to get, reacquainted
Yeah,
with my ancestors, with my
of
spiritual
course,
practices,
of
just
course.
having healthier habits. So,
Yeah.
I came out here, I joked that I'm going to be a straight up LA punchline. So yoga and crystals and
Yes.
meditation and,
Yeah.
eating more fruits
Green
and
juice.
vegetables, green juice, all that stuff. And for the most part, I've been successful at better incorporating those elements into my life. And they've
Yeah.
always been a part of who I am, partially because of my parents.
Yes.
Um, but I think like my parents allowed me to explore spirituality for myself. My
I love that.
mother has
Hmm.
neither of them were raised to be religious per se,
Mm.
and which is not necessarily the norm for a lot of
Hmm.
African American kids to
Right.
grow up with neither of my parents were Christian, and
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I was not brought into the brought up in the
Yeah.
church,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which was isolating and still at times can be a
Yeah.
little bit isolating
I
when I'm
understand that.
around friends and
Hmm.
peers.
Hmm.
I have a deep respect for a lot
Mm.
of the work that the Black church has done in this
Hmm.
country, and beyond,
Yeah.
and some, the civil rights work and
Yeah.
community work. But when it's not it's not where
Right.
you're
Frank. Yeah.
grounded,
Yeah.
and at times I think there's just such an expectation that it is where you're from. Right. So I went to
Yes.
an HBCU.
Mm.
So a lot of events started off with a prayer.
Right.
Right. I
And you're kind of
remember
like, yeah.
yeah,
I have a similar background to you. My parents didn't force any of it onto us. And so, yes, I could say we were Christian, but we didn't
yeah.
regularly go to church until later on. And so it was all very like, what? Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. And so my mother, she explored a lot of different religions throughout her
Mm.
life, including
Hmm.
Christianity and Buddhism.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
so I remember her, her Buddhist
Mm.
meditation supplies and things being in the house and her
Yeah.
sometimes still using them.
Yeah.
My father was a priest
Hmm.
in the Yoruba religion that
Oh,
he
nice.
practices at one point. He doesn't have
Yeah.
the, he abdicated his title, but he
Oh,
still practices. And,
oh, nice.
but he didn't bring the children into it. I think
Right.
partially because our mother, because our
Yeah.
mothers didn't practice, he respected that.
Hmm.
So I always kind of revered that he had, and treasured that he
Mm.
had a practice. And
Yeah.
I've known, a lot of people to be initiated into religions like
Yes.
that, and I've watched
Yeah.
them go through, and so I've always, I think for me, particularly since I was a teenager, and I explored Islam. I think that
Yeah.
was the closest I got to like, okay,
Hmm.
I'm gonna join a religion. I'm gonna do
Yeah.
something formal. And I didn't find myself called there, but I'd always believed that there is a creator,
Mm.
and
Yes.
that we owe
Yeah.
gratitude to our
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
creator, and that we should be in conversation with the creator
Of
regularly.
course.
I believe in in our ancestors, and that
Yeah.
we are from
Yes.
something and
Hmm.
someone's, and
Hmm.
that they love us and that they
Oh,
guide us and
really
that they
do.
are attuned to what we are doing, and that
Mm.
we have to
Yeah.
look to them for guidance, not just in direct conversation,
Right.
but by looking at their history and looking at their work
Of
and looking at their mistakes
course.
and looking at their triumphs.
I love that you said that. Looking at their mistakes. I love you said that. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So my spiritual practice has largely been cobbled together from
Yes.
elements of various
Yeah.
spiritual practices that I've been introduced to throughout my life, and I feel okay with that.
Good.
I've come to incorporate your cards as part of
Oh,
my practice.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I love
yeah,
that. I love that. I love that people have a journey to their spiritual practice. I feel like that is for me, and I just feel like that's the best way to come into spiritual practices, because what the ancestors have shown me is that these events that happen in my life are happening for a reason, because they need to add up for this path I need to follow. So it always happens at the right time. You're always doing something that you need to do. There's never ever anything happening to you that shouldn't be happening to you, right?
mm,
Even the horrible bits, even there's something to get out of that, but that's not to say that we should be abused. But it
right,
is to say that there is something to gain out of those things that aren't always as obvious. And sometimes the pain is a lot to bear for the lesson. So I love that. I really love that. And with the cards, you know, it really was a kind of, and I've mentioned this before to everyone, that it was a love letter to the diaspora. So yes, I'm a first generation Ghanaian, British born Ghanaian, right? And so yes, I have a close affinity to Ghana. My parents can give me the culture quite readily in the home and things like that. But I'm still a Black British person. That is my culture. No matter what we're going to say or do, that's the culture I was brought up in. Those are probably my reference points. And so I'm part of the diaspora, and very much so, as I'm, you know, I went into a process of decolonizing my life, and it really made sense that we need these tools that our ancestors created so we can start using them and navigating our ways to the best parts of our life, right? And again, as you mentioned, our ancestors love us and they want us to do the best. So I'm excited. I'm excited that we're on the same page. So, you know, lots is happening right now, right? It's crazy. And this craziness, I also see lots of opportunity. And there's lots of things that kind of happened this week on the last 10 days that have ancestrally, spiritually have made me go, And so the first one that I wanted to talk to you about is the painting of Black Lives Matter on the floors, on the roads. There's one in DC, there's one in Brooklyn now, I believe, and I think Philadelphia also has it, and I think London has also done it as well, which is interesting. Where I come from, really interesting. But anyway, they've done this, and what I know of, especially in the hoodoo tradition, things that are on the floor, things that are beneath you, things that are stepped on, is about domination. It's about you being able to dominate that. And so it really didn't sit right with me when I saw these paintings of, I understood the intention, but I was like, on the floor where people are. So I don't know, what's your understanding? How did you feel about that kind of action?
You know, it's funny. That was my initial reaction. That seeing it, that it was on the ground that people would walk on. And it made me think of all things. I'm a member of a sorority, and one of my friends saying to me, one of my sorority sisters who joined before I did, that she wouldn't own a doormat. Like, you know, we have all types of paraphernalia, and she said, well, I wouldn't own a doormat with our letters on it, because imagine, you know, we're AKAs, imagine adulthood shredding on your letters. And so that was my first thought. I went back to there, and I was like, I get the gesture, but the idea that you're walking on top of this, you know, for me doesn't quite sit right. And then energetically, energetically, something about that seems off to me when there are so many other spaces that are higher, you know, billboards, sides. It's
got to be exalted, and it has to actually loom on people.
Where you can look up to it as opposed to, you know, looking down. And then also, I think for me, and again, I do think it's a beautiful.
Definitely action. I love
beautiful gesture. But I do wonder about, in some of those places in particular, where leadership has not protected the Black community from police terror, the idea of protesters, you know, be they Black themselves or allies, being arrested while protesting for Black lives on top of that. Black Lives Matters, for me, is a really disturbing image.
Very much so. And it's even just where it came to all the companies rehashing Black Lives Matter. There was a point I felt in the last week where literally I couldn't move for everybody saying Black Lives Matter. And it actually spiritually felt for me like a disempowering of a very powerful slogan. You know, it's a slogan that I think was actually one of the, when it was in the year it was created, it was one of the best marketing slogans that I've ever experienced, because of the visceral action you have. You either love it with all your heart because you know what it's saying, or if you're a white supremacist, you hate it and it makes you feel like your whole existence means nothing. And so for those three words to be uttered and then you to get those binary kind of reactions for me really made me understand just how powerful and how exact and how on point that energy was. But it was kind of fun. It was weird to see the paintings of all of it on the floor. And I understand what people are trying to do, but I also think that we have to be very intentional about our practices around how we're trying to exalt ourselves and also the energy we're giving. So in saying that, we, you know, just in a long line of people and their activism, let's move on to Kente Gate. So do you know what I mean by Kente?
Yes.
I'm like, whoa. So, like, what were your thoughts about seeing the Democrats on their knees in kente stoles? Yeah.
I mean, I'm just curious to know whose idea that was.
Right. Like, again, can we have a talk?
Can we talk about this? It's like, do you all need diversity and inclusion training when you have this many Black members who should have been able to tell you that this was not it?
Right.
The visual, I think the knee in particular, I mean, I don't know what was worse, but the kente made me think of, and I don't know that you probably wouldn't recall this because you're not from the States, but around 1992, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I swear I'm like the only person who remembers this.
I know Coca-Cola used it at one point, but I didn't know KFC.
Yes. So the early 90s were an interesting time. Kente cloth was everywhere. And KFC tried out something in certain urban markets where they had kente, kente, not full kente, kufis and kente adorned uniforms. And they were selling traditional soul food items like they called them mean greens. And I want to say maybe a peach cobbler and macaroni and cheese. And so the only good thing of this is that some of the products were acquired from local Black owned businesses. So they were bringing in vendors that, particularly I think for the desserts. So that was cool. Yeah. But this was part of their attempt at,
celebrating our relationship with that bird, because we've got a deep relationship with that bird.
Us and the bird have a serious thing. So see, someone else remembers. But, so that's kind of what it looked like to me, or like it reminded me of Coming to America. Like somebody's cartoonish vision of being connected to Africa, and so between that and then the knee. And like the knee, for me, I understand that you're nodding to Colin Kaepernick, but you had 2 years to do that, right? Like you had 4 years at this point to do that. So you had not, like, there was a time in which that gesture meant something. And now I'm associating it with the death of George Floyd. So I don't want to see you take a knee. I don't want to see people take a knee anymore, unless it's specifically at the national anthem. And honestly, to me, when I was in college, one thing I really appreciated about my alma mater is that when the Black national anthem is played, people put their fists up.
Oh, brilliant.
Right. And so and so it wasn't that if the American national anthem was played, I stayed seated. As did a lot of people. I've always been the one to stay seated. But I
certainly don't sing "God Save the Queen." I'll tell you that right now. I do not sing that song.
I just think it would have been so much more powerful if they simply worn all black.
Right.
They could have made that statement, and they could have worn all black, because
I think so too.
You don't need a costume, right? No, I think when you're making a statement that is solemn and serious, this is a moment of reflection and mourning, that all black would have been appropriate.
You're right. And just on that level, kente cloth, just to explain it for those who don't know, is a celebratory cloth. And it should be used sparingly, because it really is something that's revered really highly. It actually at one point it was only used for royalty and people who were of really high standing in the country, in Ghana. But obviously as time's gone on, more people are wearing it. But they're wearing it for weddings, they're wearing it for births, christenings. You do not wear that cloth for anything to do with death. Anything. We have cloths that you could have worn to represent your mourning. And this is where I hate that people pick up pieces of culture without context and just think, oh, it's nice, let me just do that. And it's like, no, you're not going to just do anything, because there's some cultures that we know we can't do that to, and they're very protected. But it feels like African cultures and African technologies are always the cheapest thing to grab and cross apart. And it's like, we have to stop doing that, right?
And absolutely. And I think that is a diasporic issue. Like we know, as African Americans, we certainly feel that people from across the world feel comfortable, tapping into, borrowing from our culture, incorporating pieces of it, without any regard for what does this mean. And I also know it's something that we're guilty, and it's something that other folks of the diaspora have done with our culture. And vice versa. It's something that we do.
No one's immune. Everybody's doing it.
And I know that when African Americans do it, it's oftentimes this desperate grab. And I'm not going to say I'm not guilty of it. We want so badly to be connected to Africa,
I see that,
and we are. And because we can't, most of us can't point to a map and trace back and say, my ancestors were from here, and so this is the cloth, that we would have worn. This is, this is the tribe we would have been we would have belonged to. Like, I get you. So much of who, where we came from has been erased.
And
so, so I'm always, I try to be empathetic,
Yes.
because I
Yeah.
understand, but at the same time, I also don't want to run afoul
Right.
of
Right.
my
Yeah.
ancestors, of anyone else's practices, because
Yeah.
I bought a dress because it was a pretty African fabric, and I don't realize I'm wearing a funeral dress to a
Right.
birthday party.
Yeah. And I will also say, even me as a first generation Ghanaian, I get it wrong and I get checked by my sisters and my mum. Trust me. And while I know they love me, the checking is hard. It's like, what the
Yeah,
hell are you doing? Like, literally, they're checking me. It's like, what's this? You're being stupid. Like, you don't do that. You don't greet from this time. You don't take with that. Like,
yeah.
those things are what I have to take on the chin
Mm-hmm.
because and so I have seen sometimes where people have tried to correct people and it's unnecessary, some of the
Yeah,
language use and all the rest of it. But what I do understand is that for me, I'm always in a constant state of learning. So there's things, as my experiences living in America, where there's people, they check me, they're just about, well, here we don't really do that and we don't really say that, and that's not how we use that in this context. And I feel like if I'm going to be in this defensive place of, well, this is how I'm going to use it, it's kind of like, well, why are you here? Are you here
right.
to learn and experience, or are you here to just be kind of have this imperialistic attitude, which we don't want people to have with us, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's been a week of kind of rolling my eyes, and I'm actually surprised that you don't just see the whites of my eyes, that you actually see my eyes, because I was just like, what is going on? But it's interesting to me. I mean, for you right now, what does this moment, what does COVID, what does the uprisings, what does this signify for you? And is there anything you particularly want people to know, watch out for, any guidance you want to give, that maybe we're not talking about?
I think that for me, this moment represents more than any other
Mm-hmm.
in my lifetime the possibility of radical transformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of us who, even if we are adjacent to activism in some way, or if we are trying to,
Mm-hmm.
affect change in people's minds, we
Mm-hmm.
didn't necessarily believe that, and behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
that there would be a transformation around us, right? It was that
Mm-hmm.
I've, as a writer, I have strive to be in communication with Black people about
Yeah.
how we see ourselves, as
Yes.
opposed to in communication with the world about how they see Black people. I felt it was
Exactly.
more fruitful for me to,
Yeah.
adorn our self-esteem and to talk to us about
Yes.
how we treat one another. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, my passion for feminism and gender,
Mm-hmm.
equity has always been, we can reconstruct this for ourselves, and it
Yes.
can better help us survive the
Right.
madness of white supremacist patriarchy under
Right.
which we live.
Yeah.
But the idea that the world around us could perhaps shift and say, Black lives do matter. We
Mm.
have done wrong by you. There are things that
Mhm,
you all are
mhm,
owed,
mhm,
and that,
mhm.
other peoples would come to recognize that and truly stand in solidarity with us. I mean, we've always had allies, we've always had friends,
Yes, that's true.
but we've largely been alone in the world in so many
Yeah,
ways, right? And I
very, you're
think,
right.
I think
Abandoned,
abandoned,
abandoned. Yeah.
abandoned.
Hmm.
That is the African American experience in so many
Yeah.
ways. I think that's the global
Yes.
African experience, because the world
Yes.
around us has always been okay with colonization, has been
Exactly.
okay with
Right.
oppression, has been okay with,
Hmm.
people from other parts of the East and from the West
West. Yeah. Coming,
taking,
taking. Yeah.
taking,
And
and so,
brutally doing so. Hmm.
and brutally doing so, and
Hmm.
the world behaving as if either we were,
Hmm.
pathetic creatures, who
Yes.
simply could not stop this from happening, or that
Right.
we deserve this
Right.
somehow,
Right.
and that this
Yeah.
needs to happen, that these
Yes.
jewels that you all have in terms of human
Hmm.
resources and physical, natural resources,
Yes.
the best that the world can do is to take these things,
Exactly. Yeah.
because we
Because you
require,
can't handle it. You
you
can't
can't handle it.
possibly take care of
You
it.
can't
Yeah.
possibly take care of it, but yet
Yeah.
the creativity of our people is treasured, just not
It's
the people who
amazing.
are the creatives,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The labor, but not the laborer. And
Yeah.
so, I'm not going to say I think that in 10 years we look up and there's a brand new world, but
Mm.
I also believe that it is entirely possible that in 10
Yeah.
years we see a drastically different experience,
Hmm.
set of experiences for our people, in America and beyond.
Yeah.
I think of how, um, that African nations are calling on the UN to have,
Mm.
to talk about torture and talk about police
Yes.
brutality.
Yes.
They're talking about us.
Yes.
What that
Yes.
means, that the
Yeah.
world is talking about us, and
Hmm.
I've always, halfway joked, halfway lamented, like, why hasn't anyone, come back for, like, not necessarily just from the
Hmm.
continent, but like
Hmm.
the US goes to other nations
Yeah.
and talks about human rights violations and talks
Right.
about acts of violence and war,
Yes.
against their people.
Hmm.
Why hasn't any other nation
Come to
descended
say,
upon
right.
America and come to save us?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
who cares about what's it's happening in
Right.
front of the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so now the world is paying attention to us. And I think that this will strengthen our self-esteem
Yes.
in many ways. I think it'll
Hmm.
strengthen our connection to the diaspora. I think
Mm.
that, it'll allow us to be, I think that recognition that we've wanted,
Yes. Yeah.
that we are a part of you all, and we need
Yes.
you and you need us, and we need
Hmm.
have to learn, rethink how we engage with one another, and that we have to learn to respect one another.
Yes. That's a big
And that
thing.
it's
Hmm.
a very big thing. And I know that's something that we are so often guilty of failing to
Mm.
do, because we've been
Hmm.
taught to hate each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
These are the weak
definitely.
ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
ancestors sold them off,
Right.
and
Because
and
that's
then
the only narrative. That's the
that's
only narrative possibly that could have happened, that Africans just got rid of you. And it's
right,
like, no,
right,
and it's not to say that didn't happen. It's to say that that's not the bulk way that Africans left the continent. It
right,
really isn't. Because where are all these rich families if that was the case? Because wouldn't
right,
they have millions and still be rich now? Like, you
right.
cannot lose that type of money over that number of years. Look at all the white families who are still rich from that.
Still are rich from that, and also how we look at our people as
Mhm.
primal, right? As
Right.
how we have adopted the attitude of
Right.
the
This is it.
colonizer,
The
you know.
imperialistic, well, oh, I'll come over. I hear it a lot. People going to Ghana for the year of return, which was great. But I was very worried about this imperialistic kind of understanding of the world and treating it like, oh, I can go there and fix it. Why doesn't this
Right,
work? And I'm like, well, maybe it doesn't work because that's how they want it.
right,
Maybe that's the Ghanaian way. Maybe, and
right.
I've been guilty of it when I first used to
Yeah,
go there. I used to be like, if they could just do this, and if they, no, that's what it is. If you go, you go. And I've learned that living outside of England as well, that I'm coming here, so I'm going to meet it where it is.
right,
Right. And that's my experience. I have to meet people and places where they are and get involved. I can't sit from a certain pedestal, which I don't have, and then start judging and say, well, if this could be like, because what's that about? Why are you here?
right,
Right.
right.
So I get you. I hear you on that level completely. And I love what you said about you were talking about abandonment, and that African Americans have wanted this connection and to be seen and to be heard about their experiences. And I will say that I definitely know, and I've experienced that Black British people have always seen you, because we go through it too. Pardon me, excuse me. So some of our situations is that we're 3% of the population, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the weight of whiteness, the gaslighting of whiteness, and what
Mm.
happens to your Black experiences, I could say, and it's not an oppression Olympics, but it's an acute situation that Black British people are in Britain, because of the tiny numbers, and also just because the people who started this game that we're all in, this game, Game of Thrones, and that we're all in, were the people that we're there, which is the British, and people like to forget that, because they like to think that they ended it, but they didn't
Right.
end it. It's still going on. Right. So I love that we're at this moment and everything cannot be ignored. And that was what 2020 was about: alignment. You either get in or you get out. And so for me, it's really important that while we're making these choices, that we're really digging deep. So what kind of choices has kind of COVID and everything, what kind of things have you made right now about the situations coming about? Or did you make choices a while ago about who you were going to be and the world you wanted to live and the legacy you're trying to build? What kind of things, has this situation maybe forced you to feel or confront?
I think it's forced me to I don't want to say strengthen my commitment to the choices that I've made. It's tested them. It's like, this is who you say you are, right?
Yeah.
So you've always said you're a race woman. You've always said that you wanted
Yes.
to be an advocate for your people. And I typically don't
Yeah.
refer, I don't typically call myself an activist, even though I
Yeah.
know that the work
Yeah.
I do is,
Yeah.
a form of activism,
Hmm.
right? Michaela Angela Davis who was a mentor of mine, called the
Hmm.
image activism, right? So if we're
Yes.
talking to people about how you see yourselves, right? If
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
talking about colorism, if we're talking
Hmm.
about classism, if we're talking
Hmm.
about feminisms,
Yeah.
in the specific role of Black women
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
the world and in this country, and asking people to reconsider that is an act of activism, just because it's not
Mm.
organizing or
Right.
protesting or,
Mm-hmm.
writing petitions and stuff like
Mm.
that, doesn't mean it's not activism. But for me, I want to censor traditional activism in so many ways that I would prefer,
Yes.
I just say like I'm activist adjacent, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and still I've always said that like I want to be a voice for my people. I want to serve my
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
And so now it's about like what I think a lot of us are grappling with the question, and I haven't answered this one fully for myself, like what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to give
Yes.
up? And
Yes. 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 Those are the big
also,
ones, right? The
yes,
hard ones.
definitely. And what am I best suited to do? And so I've always said,
Yes.
like, if writing is my gift and my
Yeah.
talent, then that is the thing that I have to tap into this moment. So I've got a
Mm.
lot of things I've written in the last couple of months that are not published or haven't been pitched that I've
Mm.
been trying to
Mhm.
get right. Like
Yeah.
I look back at 2014 in Ferguson, during the uprisings
Mm-hmm.
there, I spent quite a bit of time on the ground, and I published a
Mm.
lot of articles. And I've been doing some media appearances and some hosting
Yeah.
things these past couple of weeks. But aside from that, I've largely been quiet. I've been trying to
Yes.
amplify other
Yes.
voices, and because I want to. And there are definitely things I'm doing. There are
Yeah.
things that are happening behind. I'm doing a lot of work behind the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
and some of that work just isn't meant to be public yet. And also,
Right.
some of it is just a matter of trying to figure out where am I best positioned to be of service.
Yes, yes. And I really appreciate that you're pausing to do that, that you're taking your time, because I think, I've seen some judgment on social media and other things saying, you should be out there and stuff. Well, you know what? Actually, there's some other skills where I can be far more impactful. And
Yeah.
also, when the protesters get tired, who's going to take up the mantle, and what
Right.
will that look like?
Exactly.
And I had a IG live yesterday with a friend, and she said to me what she believes is that the second wave of protest is going to be through spirituality, and that's where the fight's going to happen. And I certainly feel it, and I'm certainly getting into a place where I'm tooling up, I'm preparing my armor, and I urge everybody to do that as well, to be spiritually armored as heavily as possible. And your ancestors know how to do that and to guide you how to do that. And the reason being is because the old ways don't work anymore, so everything needs to go up a level. So that means the attacks will go up a level. It won't be just physical attacks. It's going to be far more mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual. It's always been a spiritual thing, which people ignore quite a bit, but it's actually that's the centering of the work I'm doing. So as I said, I started a decolonization process, and I was like, well, the first thing I've got to do, I can't be doing Christianity. There's no way in hell. Like, that don't make no sense to me, particularly as it's an amalgam of African spirituality, and I have a religion which is a Khan religion, which is where it is of my people. So why would I do that? It made no sense. So for me, I like that you took the time to kind of think, okay, where do I fit? And you're trying to tweak things to get it right. Because when the protests stop, because they do, because, that energy cannot always be kept at that level. And so when the protests stop, what are we going to do? And we're going to need words of encouragement, writers, thought leaders, spiritualists. They're going to be, and they are still important right now, but they're going to be so essential to how we move forward. So I love that. I really love that. Is there anything that you think people are missing in this moment as well? Anything that you think that, wow, no, people aren't seeing this? Is there anything like that? Or you think, no, it's everything's happening as it should be,
I think that there are a lot of folks that are still missing the gender piece.
Yeah.
And I feel
yeah, you're right.
like one of the ways that I am best in service to my people, as opposed to being the voice around race and racism, is that it's been being a voice amongst us about gender. And how do we fully include Black women and girls in what we are doing and what we say our vision for the future is, and how do we, and also with regards to sexuality and gender expression, like how are we fully integrating Black LGBT people into our activism, into our spiritual practices, like how are we affirming that all Black lives do matter, right? And instead of getting hung up on what is it, this traditional idea of what a servant leader should look like, right? Like a charismatic heterosexual man. People say, there are no leaders in this moment. I'm like, you're saying that because you can't think of somebody who you would call a Dr. King figure or a Malcolm
Mm-hmm.
X figure, and
Mm-hmm.
there's been intention around not anointing somebody in that way because
This
of the
what happens
assassinations. What
exactly,
happens to
and
those
we don't
leaders?
need leadership. We have to be the leaders.
We have to be leaders,
What
and
where
so
has leadership got us?
where has that kind of leadership got us? And then I think it's important that,
Mm-hmm.
those voices and Stokely Carmichael
Mm-hmm.
and Angela Davis,
Yeah.
we've had women leaders, we've had male leaders that have contributed incredible, important work that has
Mm-hmm.
helped to get us to the best parts of where we are. But I think that by only being able to receive certain voices, by only being able to recognize it in a certain package, we've done ourselves a
Yeah.
disservice because some of
Yeah.
our best thinkers have been working class Black folks,
Yes.
folks who
Yes.
were coming from rural areas who didn't
Yeah.
have,
Mm-hmm.
PhDs or formal
Right.
educations. I
Mm-hmm.
think of Fannie Lou Hamer, as a
Right.
voice that so many people,
Mm-hmm.
I think, would have treated differently had it not been from a heavyset, dark complexioned woman who was talking about
Hello.
farmers as
I know about
opposed
that
to
life.
talking about scholars,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that we're still struggling there. And just the,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
you know, I'll give Dave Chappelle's recent comedy special
Yes.
as an
April 6th.
example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw so many people just immediately say, this is the thing we need. This was
I know.
people told
Right.
me they watched and they wept. And, there were some super powerful moments there. There are
See?
also a few small factual errors that bother me because I wanted there to be
Mm.
I'm like, where's your team? Where's the person who says,
Yeah.
this is how, that Philando
Yeah.
Castile was not killed in front of his wife and child. He was killed in
No.
front of his girlfriend and her
Girlfriend.
child.
Yeah. Her child. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an important thing to get right
Yes.
because we're telling he
Yes.
is an ancestor now. We're telling his story. And so the
Yes.
idea of getting
Yes.
that wrong when you have
Yeah.
every available resource to get it right. But he didn't
Mm-hmm.
call
Mm-hmm.
out the name of one Black woman.
No, he didn't. And the one Black woman he did, he wasn't so nice about. And I'm thinking,
Yeah,
I've never really seen you publicly do that to Kanye, who's actually on the same level as Candice Owens. And yeah,
absolutely.
trust me, it stuck. I saw that yesterday. I was like,
Yeah,
oh, we're not going to talk
yeah.
about Kanye. We're not going to
We're
talk
never
about
going
him
to,
and our
right.
choice to be slaves. We're not going to talk about that. But we're going
I
to talk about
didn't,
Candice. Mm.
I didn't know who Candace Owens was until Kanye West discovered her.
Right,
I
right,
honestly didn't, I
right.
tried not to pay attention to those people. And so
Yes, yeah.
imagine that the
It's
Black
better for your
woman,
mental health. Yeah.
yeah, and the Black woman that Kanye has done the most, I mean, short of perhaps his ex-girlfriend Amber Rose, but like the
Right.
Black woman that he's given the biggest platform to
It's
is
this
not
right
Tiana
wing.
Taylor,
No,
is not some incredibly gifted vocalist or
no.
rapper that he's signed to his label. It's
Speak on
Candace
it.
Owens. And I
Hmm.
know that, Dave and Kanye are friends, so I'm not
So do I. And
surprised.
this is my point. That's exactly it. And so you want to preach to us, but you can't call out the bullshit that you kind of revel in a daily basis. And I'm not
Right.
here for it. Because
Yeah.
yes, you're gifted, you have a great critical analysis of society. But what does that mean if you can't even do it to your own self in your circles?
Right.
That means that
Yeah.
you can tell everyone else and preach on a mountain, and then it's
Yep.
like, I'll go home and I'll do what the fuck I want.
Right.
It doesn't work for me. And this is the whole thing about leadership. This is why we
Yeah.
don't need leaders. He said it himself. What the fuck does a celebrity need to say? Nothing,
Right.
actually.
And I think that on one hand, there's a part of me that's like, you're right, you should say nothing. But since you have decided to speak,
Right.
get it right.
Right.
So if you're going to
Right.
talk about Trayvon, yes, we must continue. We'll never forget
Yes.
Trayvon Martin. We should
Yes.
never forget Eric Martin. We should never forget Philando Castile. We should never forget,
Mm-hmm.
any of the lives that have been
Mm-hmm.
lost in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But to not be able to summon the name of one Black woman, to me, either says that
Right.
you don't know that it's happening to us or you don't care.
Don't care.
That this is for you a Black man issue. And
Yes.
and for people who see this as a Black man issue, if that is your vision, if you see this as a Black man's issue, then why do you expect the Black women to take up this fight?
Exactly.
Right? You expect
Yes.
solidarity, you expect loyalty.
Yes.
But if this is only your issue, then you
Are we
can't
taking
call
it up? Yeah.
why are we taking it up? Because you don't show up for our issues.
And this is
You
the
know?
thing. We want freedom, but you want freedom for some. I mean,
Right.
that's not the world that I'm trying to leave. That's not the world that I'm trying to build. I'm not
Right.
trying to replicate white supremacy with Black men at the top.
Exactly.
I don't want it. I don't want patriarchy, and I don't want white supremacy, and I don't really want capitalism in its current form, right?
Absolutely.
And all of those things destroy Black and brown people, all of us, in particular Black women and children.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't want it either. And, you know, names like Breonna Taylor and all the other women's names that we speak and we have to say and elevate, because, you know, the other names, you know, it's just, it's galling sometimes, because it's like you fight so hard and you want us to fight as hard, and we're here and you don't even remember us, or the reference we get is someone with a stinky pussy, which is what he said.
And I think
so,
that the deaths of, you know, the Black women know violence in a number of capacities, right? So that we experience it intracommunally through domestic violence and sexual violence. And many of our men and boys also experience sexual violence and intracommunal violence too. Yeah. But again, there's, you know, not as much with sexual violence, but when it comes to, you know, street violence or gang violence, we acknowledge that, we talk about that as something that we have to confront, that we, you know, have to love each other better than this. But I think the idea that a Black woman being killed by her partner, you know, or a Black trans woman being murdered by men in her community because she's a Black trans woman, that those deaths are not as significant as the deaths of Black men at the hands of law enforcement is devastating, because if anything, one should be easier to solve. Right? Like, how can we confront the state? How can we abolish prisons? How can we eliminate the threat of violence from white supremacy, where we are vastly outnumbered, right? So we, you know, we're more than 3% of the population, but we're 13% of the population, right? And we're where we are in this country, we're highly concentrated, right? In places like New York and Chicago and Atlanta. But there are places where there are very few of us, and people that are constantly in danger because the majority of their interactions are with people who do not believe in their humanity. So if you want to stand up to that, but you can't look at your brother and say, hey, leave her alone, man. She's just trying to live her life. You know, if you don't like trans women, you don't like them, just leave her alone. Right. Just walk away. Just walk away. Like, you don't have to deal with anyone. You don't have to. You could just completely ignore. Like, I think, and that's not to say that completely ignoring the existence of Black trans women is a healthy approach to, you know, allowing them to exist in the world. But it's certainly better than meeting brutalizing them, killing them, killing them, abusing them, you know, oftentimes because these men are attracted to them. Right. And they're ashamed of that. They're conflicted by it. They don't understand. Who am I? Right. Yes. You know, will people think that I'm queer? Just, you know, and even if you haven't progressed there yet, why, if it requires so many years of contemplation and consideration for you to understand or to accept that, what's the excuse when it comes to cishet women? Right? Like, why are you, these are your mother, this is what your mother was. Right? You know, like this, and that's another thing, how we quantify having to be treated well, because we have to say, we could be your mom or your sister. No, I'm just a random fucking woman. I'm just a human person. Just what about that? That really gets to me when people are just like, that could be your sister. First of all, I'm really sick of women who men are not related to being always posited as caregivers or people to get their humanity. And it was funny, there was actually a thread on Shade Room a couple of days ago or yesterday or whatever, and they said, Black men, we want to hear how much you love Black women. And did you? Right. And I think there's about 24,000 comments, right? And all of the comments from Black men that I read were about what we did for them. Were about the service we gave they take them. Care of us. I love the food you cook for us. I love the way that you hold us down. I love the way that you protect us. And I'm like, wow, there's not one fucking comment about who we are as women, as who we are as humans. Not one fucking comment that you could say, I love your ingenuity. I love the way that you want to better yourself. You educate yourself and all these things. I love the way that you find out about holistic kind of remedies and stuff. Nothing about us. All about the service of the male. And I thought, here we are. This is it. How can you want the big piece of chicken? Like, how can you expect to be a head of a community or a household or an institution if you always get the big piece? Just saying. I get the thighs, so maybe the bread. It depends on I get the best piece. Yeah, that's true. That's actually let's change it. The best. The best piece. But like, how can you expect those things? How can you expect that labor and service, and then think of yourselves as the leaders? You know, we have to hold you down. We have to make you feel like kings. If you're supposed to be kings, then you should not require this. In our absence, are you not still kings?
Say these words. And that's the thing, is that people keep needing so many other things to have an identity. And this is why, you know, I see the problems that lead into painting Black Lives Matter on the floor, that people need that. I feel like they're vindicated because, yeah, look, we showed them. It's a gesture. Right?
Gesture.
And it's not the gesture that makes up your being or humanity. You have to understand that this thing is about work that's probably going to take years, decades to do. Should we ask the Haitians how long their revolution took? Because it wasn't a summer.
It was not a summer.
Years. And they did it with the help of ancestors and ancestral and African traditional religions. And look how they've been vilified. But yet we feel like these gestures, which I don't want to knock people, but I want people to think more deeper about the longevity of where we're going with these gestures, right? And that means that you have to look at women as human fucking beings, right? That we weren't put on this earth to just be in service of men, whatever you think. Whatever you think, and whatever a woman even tells you, because we're just as socialized into thinking that could be what we should be, right?
Absolutely.
But I want us to, if we're more anchored in our spirituality, those narratives can't live. All of those kind of roles and narratives are from Christianity and patriarchy and things that we didn't create.
Right.
And so we have to start feeding back into ourselves, because that's where we get the happiness, the joy, which is based in who we are as a person and as a wider people, and not in response to white. And that's where we want to be, right? So I wanted to ask you, every month we do an Adinkra symbol of the month, right? And for June, we have Kurot Wia Mansa. Oh my God, this is bright, right? So this Adinkra symbol, let me read to you the meaning. The leopard gets wet in water, but its spots remain unchanged. And so I really wanted to hear from you what you know, maybe what this kind of symbol means to you, what that saying means to you. So it was, the leopard gets wet in water, but its spots remain unchanged. So what does that kind of signify for you? What are you thinking?
Well, I think right now we are the water.
Yeah.
You know,
wow.
I think the uprisings are the water, and the leopard is white supremacy.
Oh, wow.
You know,
I didn't think of it like that. I love this. Go on. Yeah.
I think that the spots have not changed, you know, but they're submerged. Right. And so I think that the way that leopard has to behave and has to move is being challenged in so many ways. And I think it can be challenged permanently, but the spots still remain. So how do we exist in the world with those spots, with that leopard, you know, and knowing what he is capable of and what he has done to us thus far in our existence and thus far in our relationship to these people, and how do we challenge the leopard to behave in ways that are you know, in everyone's best interest, as opposed to only in the best interest of himself.
Oh my God, you blew my mind. I didn't even have that understanding of it, but now you just flipped it and I'm like, whoa. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to have to meditate on that, because that is some power. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I didn't think of it like that. And I love that. I love that we're submerging people into what we need, our world. Come see. You wanted a cookout? Here we go. This is the cookout, right? It's not nice down here, is it? So I love that. I love that. I want some people, if you guys feel inclined, please give us some questions. We'd like to ask you questions. We have around 10 minutes left. And so I guess, tell me, is there anything you're feeling really, I guess, Black futures, right? What is Black futures to you? Because one thing I really, really, really focus on is our imagination. I don't think that people nurture Black people's imagination as deeply and as fiercely as they do other things, right? And I think from our imagination is where we create the best things of what we have in the world. And so for you, what do you feel that maybe Black people as a group, or maybe not as a group, or even yourself personally, what are you not imagining? Or maybe what are you imagining too much? You know, what's imagination for you? What do you think needs to be done with it? Yeah.
I think giving ourselves the space to be imaginative, right? And so to think about creative solutions to our problems, to think about, you know, I don't think most of us have given ourselves, and I'm certainly guilty of this, given ourselves the space to dream about a world without our oppressor in the way that we know him now, right? So what does a world without police look like? That's been hard. That's been a hard one for me. And so like, it's not that I've been pro-reform as opposed to abolition. It's that
Yeah.
in theory, I've always believed, in from the moment in which I wasn't really introduced to police abolition until
Mm.
2014, 2015,
Mm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so at the point in which it was something I became, aware
Right.
of and came to
Yeah.
learn about, it was still hard. It was like, theoretically, yes, the police should be abolished, but it was still hard for me to envision,
What would
a
come after?
world,
Like, right. Yeah.
what comes afterward,
Yeah.
what prevents man, what stands between man's inhumanity to man,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
those of us who wish to practice something else. If not the
Mm.
fear. So it's not the law enforcement has been effective. We know that they
Mm-hmm.
don't prevent crimes, that they don't solve cases, that they
Mm-hmm.
don't keep communities safer more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's still an idea that the fear of law enforcement
Mm-hmm.
can
Right.
prevent crimes, right? So
Right.
that if the possibility that I could get incarcerated or shot by
Mm.
a police officer is on the table, perhaps that's what's standing between somebody and an act of violence towards a community member, as opposed to,
Mm-hmm.
having the ethic to
Yes.
say, this is how I interact with other human beings. I'm not going
Yeah.
to cause harm.
Right.
And, sometimes so lately I've just been giving myself time to think about that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we'll still have to have some sort of uniformed person enforcing parking rules,
Mm.
but what if the first stops or start, what if the one of the first steps, because they will have to continue, there will have to be reforms, right?
Yes.
Reform has to
Yes.
happen on the path to abolition, because you have to stop the bleeding.
Yes.
So eliminating the no-knock warrants
Right.
in
Yes.
Louisville is
Yeah.
it's a step,
Yes.
right? It
Right.
is a reform moment. That doesn't mean that ultimately the answer is reform, but it's something that
Right.
has to, certain
I know.
things need to,
It's the
need to
wheel.
be
It's
done.
starting
It's
to
the
move
will,
it.
right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yesterday I gave myself some time to think about policing without guns,
Mm.
right? So like, what
Well,
if there
Britain
are,
does it. Britain
yeah,
does it.
I mean,
Yeah.
across the world, people
Yeah.
fight,
Yeah.
they do it successfully and,
Yeah.
use weapons only in
Mm-hmm.
extreme,
Yes.
situations, if at
Yeah.
all, so it's like, what if um, the threat
Mm-hmm.
of accountability is not one about
Mm.
violence,
Mm-hmm.
but just
Yeah.
simply you've disappointed your community, right? And so now we have
Mm.
to sit with you in contemplation, and now you have
Mm-hmm.
to make some sort of restitution toward
Mm-hmm.
the persons that you've harmed.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I think I think now more than ever, we have to imagine what the world we want looks
Yes.
like, because I don't think most of us could tell you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of
Yeah.
us could only say, I don't want this. I don't
This.
want that,
Right.
But
Yes.
what do
But
you
what
want?
do you want? And I think that's something with oppressed groups, marginalized groups, is something that we're not socialized to believe that we can really demand what we want. So don't even go there. Oh, you
Right.
want to talk about what you want? Okay, ha ha ha. Okay, you'll get that, yeah. And it's like, no, no, no. We have to. Just like the energy I'm saying of Black Lives Matter being on the floor, you want it to loom. You want it to
Right.
be on top. You want it to be imposing, that people cannot escape it. That my imagination of safety and equality and freedom and being close to nature and having the freedom to move around the world without all of these crazy visas and this, blah, 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 blah. That should not be something that I'm just like, oh, but it would be nice to. I'm not even going to say it. It's ridiculous to me.
You know what you've made me think about today? When I think about Black Lives Matter being written on the ground, like, so who sees it, right? So if it's
Right.
seen from up high,
Yeah.
that means your ancestors are looking down on these words, and when they're seeing that, I think if this is what you are telling the ancestors is the truth, when the body that put those words on the ground does not act in such a way, what will be the repercussions? Like, so you are lying to a group that you don't lie to.
You don't lie
So
to
don't
them.
tell my ancestors that my life matters if you intend to behave in a way completely opposite.
Right. And it's interesting you said that the ancestors and they can be looking down, but I also feel that, things like that need to be seen. It's a warning, right?
Yeah.
It's a promise. I tell you that. I don't deal with threats. It's a promise. Yeah. And it's also a prophecy, right? Because we don't have it at the moment. So it's a prophecy that we want to happen. And so it's like, when we're blowing out candles on our birthday cake, we want the best. We make that wish, which is using fire magic. Like, people don't realize it, but that's one of the oldest forms of fire magic. And so what are we doing with it while we're saying it? Because yes, we're hearing more people. It's becoming more common in the lexicon, but how are we protecting what is really ours and what should be used with reverence? And this is where I get the agitation with the kente as well, right? Where I'm just like, stop wearing it for shit like that.
Right.
Because this protection, this kind of, oh, I can just pick that up. I can just put this on. Well, they're going to talk a little bit, but it gets more likes. All of that kind of behavior is what devalues it, what takes the energy from it, which leaves it less powerful. So I really love what you were saying about, you know, the police and you know, the defunding and reforming of them, and that how the imagination wasn't there at the beginning, but now it's like, oh, okay. And I saw someone also say that, you know, imagination is tied to emotion, and when you're traumatized, it's very hard for you to be in a place of imagination or letting yourself get to that point. But I found that it's actually one of my biggest healing tools. I've always been a little bit of a daydreamer, particularly when I was younger and in school, staring out the window, just staring, and just kind of people being like, Simone, and I'm like, oh, because I was in like another world, thinking and talking to probably spirits and all the rest of it. But it's really important that we start living in our imagination. Really important. And it's the biggest kind of gift I can give to people, one of them, which is that we need to really hone our imagination and protect it with the fierceness that we protect our lives and we protect our joy. This has been an amazing conversation. Like,
So
I have
good.
loved it. People have loved it. They've been sending those hearts and saying how amazing it is. And I want to leave everybody on a note of what would be, what are you feeling like? What is the kind of hopeful thing? What's the positive thing, if any there is? You don't have to have it. Like, I'm quite a realist, so, you know, sometimes people talk to me and they're like, oh, all right, Simone, you could be happy. It's like, I'm not happy. I'm just like, I can see it all. So what for you is something that's glaring at you at the moment that this is actually a really good thing? What's a positive for you right now?
I think, you know, a lot of folks, and this is something that, you know, we give reminders about quite often, especially in moments like, and we haven't had a moment like this in this country during my lifetime, where there's protests in all 50 states, and, you know, this level of sustained conversation and dialogue about the issue of racism. But that a lot of people, when they look back to the civil rights movement, or when they think back on the civil rights movement or the Black Power movement, they think of you know, nearly all Black people being on board, right? That everybody supported Dr. King, that everybody supported Malcolm X, and that was not true. There were a lot of Black folks who, you know, for a number of reasons, oftentimes just informed by fear, you know, survival.
I heard it was 12%. I heard it was 12% of Black people who were active and supported the civil rights movement.
Somewhere around there, you know. I mean, I think that there are people who you know, romanticize that period in so many ways, who are now, you know, but when I look at today, I think that people who would not have been active back then, right, whose attitudes and behaviors are in alignment with the group that was either just trying to make it to work or just trying to make it through the day, either because they were doing very well or because they were doing very poorly. You know, I'm struggling to survive. I don't have time for this. You know, you can't compromise my livelihood. I can't lose my home. I can't lose, you know, food on my table. And then also those who have great means that have made a life for themselves that is comfortable, and said, you know, like, the rest of you all can do this too if I did, or I don't want to lose what I have to go in the streets and get crazy with these white folks. I think that now we're seeing more people, more of our people, and more people outside of our community that are recognizing, like, that this work has to be done. You know, that the American experiment will not, it is a botched experiment. You know, it does not work. It does not work for the majority of people in this country. You know, and the experiences and the things that have happened to us are but one of the profound examples of how, you know, America's brand of patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism underserves the masses. You know, that you don't have to be that kind of poor in order to keep CEOs rich. That you know, that white children and elders have been murdered by police in order to sustain a system in which police have the sort of power they need to have over Black folks. So we're so dangerous, you'll let your own daughters and sons die to be able to protect yourselves from us. I think that I think what I'm most optimistic about in this moment, that people are waking up and seeing that.
I hear you. I do like the waking up. The veil has been thinning for a while, but now it's like, and this is what 20